So we're going to go ahead and start with our first session is called Staying True Through Waves of Change, a Macon County, Little Tennessee watershed history and approaches to preserving our watershed. So we're going to sort of start with the history of how things used to be and move into how things have changed. The first person to speak on that group will be Bill Crawford. Bill is an oral historian who knows everything about and everybody from Macon County. He had a long career as a high school social studies teacher here and was a teacher consultant for National Geographic during that time. And he now leads tours of the county. Then Dr. William McClarney will be the second speaker. He's directed the Upper Little Tennessee River Watershed Stream Biomonitoring Program, currently through Mainspring, since 1989. His emphasis is on bridging the gap between experts and the general public to build consciousness of aquatic biodiversity and what we can all do to protect it. And he's also my husband. Bob Gale is the ecologist for Mountain True, providing scientific input on issues related to environmental protection of the southern Appalachian mountain forest communities. Bob's work involves national forest and national park issues, air and water quality, and rural lands protection. He heads the Exotic Invasive Species Program for the organization.
In 1776, a Quaker man from Philadelphia, riding on a horse, wandered up from near Tampa to western North Carolina. What he found in the Little Tennessee Valley can only be described as idyllic. He mentioned rushing clean waters and sparkling streams. He visited the villages of Niquosi, Watauga, and Cowee, finding them well ordered with plantations, farming. Nearby, William Bartram, who, with his father, an even more famous naturalist from Philadelphia, was identifying plants and flora of the Southeast. He was accepted warmly by the Cherokee. He didn't have a treaty to sign, and he didn't have a gun. He returns to Philadelphia and writes Bartram's Travels. Billy boy, where have you been, charming Billy? Is thought to be William Bartram. You can visit the historic Bartram home in Philadelphia. What is the significance of this visit? He is identifying, describing plants and flora of a temperate rainforest. Southeast regions of continents, i.e. southern China and the American Southeast, have similar plants and flora. There has been an exchange of students from Kunming University and Western Carolina University to study similar forests. We have a water-rich environment here. Warm, moist air flows up from the Gulf with plenty of elbow room for the water molecules. As this air mass comes up over the southern Appalachians, it gets lifted, becomes cooler and denser. There is less room for the water molecules. It comes down as rain, and our area has perhaps the highest rainfall in the eastern U.S. on the leeward sides of the Nantahala and the Blue Ridge. Since 1931, there has been the study of water and its effect on our landscape at the Coweta Hydrologic Lab near Otto. The oldest continuous records of rainfall in the world have been recorded at this lab here in Macon County. Geographers study regions and why something is where it is. Watersheds are perhaps the most natural regions in the world. I had a professor who said that a drop of water that happened to fall on the Continental Divide was tortured and miserable because it had to decide whether it wanted to be a part of the Atlantic or the Pacific. Near the head of the Little Tennessee, near the Georgia line, a drop of water here is tortured a little less severely because it must decide only if it wants to be a part of the Gulf or the Atlantic. The Little Tennessee is a part of the Mississippi watershed. The Little Tennessee is one of three great troughs in western North Carolina, the others being the French Broad and the New, all flowing west and north. The irony about the New River is that it may be the second oldest river in the world. The reasoning here is that the New River, being able to flow north and west from near Boone, had to have been there before the Appalachians rose. More specifically, the Little Tennessee is a 77-mile long river that flows into the Tennessee south of Knoxville. Lake water covers the confluence of the Little T and the Big T and was the site of Fort Loudon, the westernmost British fort in the British Empire. Fort Loudon now has a historical reconstruction about a mile away that can be visited. Excuse me. How have we used the Little T? With the light population pressure of the Cherokee and early settlers until maybe the 80s, it provided a water commons that diluted human waste. Franklin put its sewage into Lake Emery, the Little Tennessee. And the solution to pollution was dilution. Even now, our landfill and sewage treatment plants are near the Little Tennessee to absorb leakage or failure. The Cherokee, who have been here for perhaps 1,000 years, they came from the north, we think, used the Little Tennessee for food. They physically altered the stream by building large downstream facing funnels or V's that came to an apex where fish could be caught in battens and dried for storage. Cherokee waded in the river, shooing or herding the fish into the V's. After the introduction of airplanes, it became apparent how numerous these V's were along the Little T and other rivers in the area. When my great-great-grandmother, my great-great-grandfather, George Washington Crawford, settled up on Cartuga J near Carlslegel Road, it was noticed that there were large rocks near the spring. Someone lifted one of the rocks near the spring, and there was a skeleton underneath the rock. My great-great-grandmother immediately demanded a move, and the Crawfords moved about a mile away. Now, even though Louis Pasteur popularized the germ theory a little later than this, there must have been an intuitive sense of the need for clean water. And if you can give people in the whole world a way to sanitarily dispose of human waste and clean water, you can get rid of 95% of the illnesses in the world. My mother said jokingly that if water ran over 10 rocks, it became pure. Water in the Little Tennessee watershed has been used for baptisms. The Cherokee said that when someone died, it was okay to grieve and cry for 3 days. Then you went to a stream and washed your face, and your grieving was over. Now, another central part of the water story is its convenience. The one grandmother I knew had a spring and later running water. My dad had built a gravity water system for the house I grew up in, copper tubing. I became very good at helping him make it work. In the early 1980s, I built my own gravity water system from a different spring for a different house. I built on another part of the farm, this time PVC pipe. Franklin had his first water system in 1911. Franklin was just one of a few towns in western North Carolina that used wells and a little bit of water from a stream in West Franklin, perhaps the Cartuckajay. Most western North Carolina towns developed protected watersheds. In 1911, under the Weeks Act, there began the establishment of national forests. The resultant protection of waters and air area was profound. Coinciding nearby with this was the birth of the science of forestry and the Pisgah National Forest. Finally, Franklin in the 1970s went to getting their water from protected watersheds, the Cartuckajay, and they built a water plant. Impoundment of the Little Tennessee and many of its tributaries and waters all over the South and West became widespread. In 1925, just a mile or so north of Franklin, the town of Franklin built Porter Dam for hydrologic power. In 1933, Nantahala Power took over this dam, and later Duke Power will own it, and it still produces electricity today. During World War II, the tallest concrete dam in the East was built at Fontana on the Little Tennessee, creating a lake with a 650-mile shoreline. Hundreds of small impoundments were built in the 1800s and 1900s all over the U.S. to power grist mills to grind corn into flour. On Cartuckajay Creek, just west of Franklin, a large pond and mill, Cozad's Mill, was built to grind corn with a different water-powered mechanism called a roller mill, hence the name of the street in West Franklin. Franklin had 3 different sets of water storage tanks. These existed on prominent hills serving the distinct sections of Franklin. There were 2 tanks on Goff View Drive serving West Franklin. There was a tank on Harrison Avenue serving downtown Franklin, and there was a tank on Town Mountain serving East Franklin. These tanks served not only storage, but being on high ground, they were a gravity system, adding pressure to the distribution lines. A North Carolinian, Herman Beatty, was born in 1895 in Davie County, near Winston-Salem. He attended UNC and received the first doctorate in the United States in sanitary engineering from Harvard. This was 1928. He worked at the forefront of sanitary engineering in North Carolina and the world, and improved water quality at home and abroad. In 1952, he became the chief engineer and director of sanitary engineering for the World Health Organization, a position he held until 1962. His passion was clean water. In the 1980s, a family moved to the Oak Grove area along the Little T. Dr. Bill McLarney began to study the water quality of the Little Tennessee watershed with the help of hundreds of volunteers. Fish are netted, and then Bill checks these fish with 4 questions. What species, its size, its health, its location. From this data and from thousands of fish, Bill surmises a water quality estimation of the stream where the fish are caught. Bill thinks the Little T is the last least polluted mountain river left. I asked Bill how long he would like to see this study continue on the Little Tennessee watershed. His serious and unpretentious comment was 400 years. In the 1990s, several people came up with the idea of a greenway in Franklin. With the help of Duke Power needing a path for a power line, Franklin has a 4-mile greenway that is a great walking path and connection for the public to the beauty of our river. Finally, in the 90s, people of Little Tennessee created a special park for North Carolina. It is called the Needmore Tract. Starting in the teens and the 20s, a dam was projected near the Macon County, Swain, line, and several thousand acres were bought from people who live there. This area is known as the Needmore community. The Needmore Dam was never built, and this land was still owned in the 90s by Duke Energy. A group of folks from both Macon and Swain started a campaign to buy this property from Duke Power, with the state of North Carolina spending $19 million and a small contribution of private money. The Needmore Tract was created. Needmore Road from Tillico Road to US 1974 runs along much of this beautiful section. There are several rules in the Needmore Tract. You can fish, you can boat, you can hunt, but camping is prohibited. One important benefit of the Needmore Tract, it provides a corridor for animals such as bear and deer, other large animals, to go between the Nantahala Range and the Cowees. There have been several conservation organizations that will make great contributions to the water quality of the area. The Western North Carolina Alliance, now known as Mountain Fruit, the Little Tennessee Land Trust, now known as Mainspring, the Little Tennessee Watershed, now part of Mainspring, Save Our Rivers, and its founder, Peg Jones, in the back. Peg, would you stand up, please? And Peg wanted me to tell you about a map that you can order through her. If you will talk to her about a great map of the region that must talk about water. Now, and then of course there was for a number of years, there was I don't have it, I brought my t-shirt from a Stream Watch program that was here for a while. Many of us, okay, all right, my conclusion. Most of the people in Eastern America have been complacent with the richness of water we have. It is a commodity that is always there. We have enjoyed the relatively light population and availability of water. We have adapted technology as it became available. It is now imperative to conserve. Thank you.
Anyway, I have supposedly 5 minutes to somehow make the transition between the really good old days that William Bartram experienced, the bad old days when we dumped sewage all over the place, and sort of set the stage for the not terribly perfect present days, and a talk by Bob Gale, who's going to talk quite a bit about environmental regulation. So let me just say a couple of transitional words about regulation. One, regulation is not the answer. Two, contrary to what the Trump administration would have you believe, no regulation is not the answer. We're always going to need intelligent, well thought out, adaptive and fairly enforced regulation. So I don't think anybody really likes regulation, or let me be more blunt about that. If there's somebody in the audience that really thinks that regulating other people's behavior is fun, I suggest you leave immediately and seek psychiatric help, and us normal people will go on with the meeting. So if you were to look at my personal record in public debate on regulatory issues, you'd probably find that I had spoken more often in favor of regulations than against them. So let me start with a negative regulation story. Years ago, I had a friend in the state of Wisconsin who raised fish in ponds, and he charged people to come in and fish in these ponds. And at one point, it occurred to him that he could have a value-added service by offering to fillet fish for people on site. Well, that idea lasted just as long as it took him to investigate the regulations that would apply. He found that to do that, he had to have an on-site inspector every minute the ponds were open and provide facilities for that inspector, and that's just exactly how far that idea went. Now, you can say maybe that's collateral damage from a good regulation that was meant to protect people's health. You can go conspiracy theory and say it's big-time processors trying to stifle small business, whatever. It didn't really work. Well, let me make another example, or another anecdote, really, that's closer to home. And Bill Crawford is going to heartily second me if I say one of the things we're not good at in this society is remembering history. But we've already evoked Peg Jones's name. I'm going to do it again. Many of you will remember, I hope, all the controversy back in the 1990s about the town of Highlands' need to build a new wastewater treatment plant to discharge into the Calisaja. During that time, I provided a lot of information, a lot of opinions too, to a lot of people and entities, including PEG and Save Our Rivers, who were opposed to the plan as it existed at that time. For one reason, and I continue to believe in hindsight that Save Our Rivers was fundamentally right, that we got what amounts to a less than perfect solution. But I don't want to dredge all those issues up there. I want to talk about one thing that happened during that time, and in the hope that we can do better in the future. We were fairly well into it when I discovered that some of the people that were essentially on my side, people with a real interest in protecting water quality in the Calisaja River, did not realize that Highlands was already discharging treated wastewater into the Calisaja. That somehow this became an insult, the people up on top of the mountain dumping sewage on the people lower down. Apparently people also did not know that Franklin did the same thing, discharging into the Little Tennessee River, and that really every municipality in the developed world discharges treated wastewater under some set of regulations to a natural waterway. This misunderstanding led to a lot of harsh words and a lot of insults and a lot of stupid stuff that got said on all sides, and it definitely set back the process. Result, less than perfect solution. So I guess I'd like to say this, that if you take one thing away from what Bob is going to talk about, it's this. To try to be really informed about regulations and the purpose for regulation, how the regulatory system functions. And as I look out here, I kind of realize at this point I'm kind of preaching to the choir, because obviously if you're here today, either you are informed about this stuff or you're here to get better informed about this stuff. But I do think it's important. So with that, I'll turn it over to the choir director. Bob?
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, everybody, for inviting us here today. You actually got the bench from Mountain True. I'm more a forest ecologist than I am a water person. Our organization has many branches. We were founded by a retired woman in Macon County many years ago named Esther Cunningham. And each of these gentlemen is winner of our highest award, which is the Esther Cunningham Award. That sits in our conference room. I see their names all the time. But we had only an office out of somebody's trunk then. Today we now have 4 offices. One in Asheville, one in Boone, one in Hendersonville, and our oldest office is in Franklin. It's the only one that is at the moment unstaffed, and we intend to try to correct that by the end of this year. And I'm looking forward to that because I'd like to work more on non-native invasive plants in this area. But anyway, with that said, I was asked to come and speak on the regulatory process. If we could have, we would have had our water keepers who are much more expert in some of this than I am. But I know a good bit about it. Yesterday was my 20th year with this organization, and these 2 gentlemen probably helped hire me, I don't know. But anyway, it's been a great organization to work with, and I've loved meeting all the people all around the mountains, and it's great to come back and meet a lot of you and see a lot of you again. I just wasted a couple of minutes of my time, but I felt like that was important to say. First, there are many pieces to the water regulatory puzzle, and there's no way I could cover all of them in 15 minutes. But I first want to talk about water quality in our region, and it's actually playing upon what Bill McClarney and Bill Crawford have said. We are really lucky. I want to emphasize how lucky we are to have the clean water we have in our area. There are a lot of reasons for that, but we can't take it for granted. And I guess I am preaching a lot to the choir here, but water it's our basic need for survival, along with good air and good food. It affects us all. It doesn't matter whether we're rich or poor, what our philosophies are, who we vote for, where we go to church. It affects every one of us, and we've all got to protect it. It's very important. Many of us who came of age before the 1970s remember what Bill was referring to. There were times when there was a time when our rivers and lakes nationwide were horribly polluted. The Cuyahoga River up north actually caught on fire. I believe spontaneously, I'm not sure, but it caught on fire because of the chemical pollution in it. Imagine that. Could you imagine one of our streams just catching on fire because it was so polluted? Our French Broad River was considered, it was written off as useless. It was called too thick to drink and too thin to plow. I guess they figured if it was a little thicker, they could have planted crops in it, but it wasn't quite thick enough for that. That quote comes from Wilma Dykeman's book, The French Broad, by the way. Even municipalities were dumping untreated sewage into streams. That's how we got rid of things. Land alterations, even here in the western North Carolina mountains where we didn't have as much chemical pollution or that sort of thing, people were straight piping, and land alterations, all kinds of activities were causing sedimentation into our streams at a much higher rate. People everywhere got so upset about this, and today, 50 years later, our waters are much, much, much cleaner. We're really lucky to have that. For the first time in history, the reason that happened for the first time in history is that we got a tool to clean up these things. It was called the Clean Water Act, and it's been one of the best things we've ever had. People demanded something, and the government actually listened and responded. And Congress passed it, the President signed it, and regulations, as Bill talked about, followed. But there are a lot of different regulations, and they cover different things in different situations, and different entities enforce them. So it is complicated. One by one, though, region by region in the country, areas got cleaned up. Rivers got cleaned up. Lakes got cleaned up. There was a time when I lived on Lake Erie, and we even swam in it, and then we found out how polluted it was. They've cleaned up Lake Erie surprisingly well. And this has happened everywhere. So it's easy to rail against government and overreach and that sort of thing. It's easy to jump on the media bandwagon when you hear something and something gets blown up. But the Clean Water Act is one shining example of how a problem was addressed and solutions were found and goals were set. And they were very well toward being reached. We haven't done everything perfect. We definitely do not have perfectly clean water everywhere, but it has definitely been a good tool. What it has not done well was the public education level down to the average citizen. Businesses, municipalities, corporations, they understand the details of the Clean Water Act because they have to live by them. But, you know, Joe Smith out in such and such county may not have the faintest idea what to do if there's a problem in his area. But these are the kind of questions we get. What happens if animals are floating down the river? Is somebody dumping them illegally? Is there straight piping somebody's seeing happening? Is there sediment suddenly flushing down the stream? Those are the kind of questions we get at Mountain True, and we try to help people get through that and direct them through the bureaucracy of the water quality regulations. That's probably the best service we offer. We actually do test water and sample it. We grow E. coli bacteria in streams in areas where we feel like there's it's maybe exceeding standards, and we find the source and report it and try to get action on it, and we usually do. But the best service is probably just answering everyday people's questions of what should I do? I want to emphasize that we don't need new laws. We've got laws. It's just enforcement of the existing laws that's needed, and using the tools that are in place. But the problem is enforcement is only good if there's a budget and a staff to provide for it. And that is the one thing that has been cut. The budgets and staffs have been cut in recent years. We're going the wrong way on that kind of stuff. But there are still staff, and there are people that go to certain regions of the state to follow up on problems. So getting to those key people and getting something to happen is what is needed. And in this case, the squeaky wheel is the one that gets greased. So what do you do if you see such things as dead animals or straight piping or sewage or a developer allowing machinery to drive through streams or digging into banks? The best thing we can tell you to do is usually to start local. There may be something in a local town or municipality that can start to address some of the stuff, or there may be a key person there. Quite often there's not in Western North Carolina. So the thing to do is go to the next level, and that's the county. Some counties actually have erosion control, a set of erosion control laws or regulations and permitting. And it may be that, for instance, a developer may be doing something and may not even have a permit. Things like that have been found and reported. And then if you don't have such a county entity, going to the state is the thing. North Carolina Division of Water Quality is one area, and there are other your local soil conservation district actually can be helpful in some agricultural situations. The Army Corps of Engineers may get involved, so it's complicated. But what is needed is that you be persistent and insistent, and you keep working until you get to the key person that can address your problem, and then insist that it be looked at, investigated, and corrected. And that is a tough thing for the average person to do, but persistence can get you there. It's very easy to get put off, or people are busy in bureaucracies, and or they just don't know the left arm may not know what the right arm's up to. But you can get to the bottom of that. I would encourage people, this is a very short talk I'm giving, but to sort of close it, I would encourage that we all continue to guard this resource. Keep your eyes open. If something doesn't look right, or doesn't smell right, or if you see something that just clearly looks like a violation, report it. That gets difficult too, where you start having things like one neighbor doesn't want to get on the bad side of another neighbor, but he sees something going wrong. How do you report that? We've actually had people from rural counties call somebody else that they knew was a member of our organization for a long time, and that person called us and reported it and said, Joe so-and-so doesn't want to get on the bad side, but he wants this taken care of, and it's horrible what's happening. That is another way, I guess, of getting around that. But it does get difficult when you're trying to keep friendly in your local community. But if none of this works, if none of this gets you anywhere, Mountain True may be able to help you. We work on this stuff a lot, and we are a resource. You can call us for help, and we've had some pretty significant things happen where we were able to get something corrected. And we had some good things. In Haywood County, monitoring found a problem that we reported, and the farmer simply didn't know the situation. He actually didn't know what was happening to a stream, and he didn't know what to do about it. And Soil and Water Conservation, we connected him with them, and they ended up helping him, got a grant and helped pay for a correction. And he actually was delighted about it, and then it made him want to work harder to protect his stream. So there can be some really good stories out of that. We've had another story where on the French Broad, a major pollution event was happening from a waste lagoon, and the way we found out about it was two local sixth-generation fishermen were out in their boat fishing, and they noticed a horrible discharge coming down a ditch into the French Broad River. And they called me, and fortunately I was able to call our riverkeeper, who was out on the water at that time, thanks to cell phone technology. And he met up with them, and they showed him the spot. They followed it up and found where it was coming from and got enforcement from the state. And they were fined a very large fine. And they were forced to clean up the lagoon. And it turned out they'd been cited previously a number of times, and they just, in that case, they were ignoring it. But this time they actually had to clean everything up, and it solved that problem. So you never know where these things are going to lead, but it is a complicated process, but we may be able to help you if you can't get there yourself. And that's basically what I would have to say.
You'll have time for some questions and comments.
Yeah, okay.
If there are questions or comments, yeah.
You might want to tell people what a straight pipe is.
Oh, yes. Good. Well, yeah, it's just a term for sewage being pumped directly into a stream, rather than, into a septic tank or that sort of thing. And you get into all kinds of issues. I remember when I took hydrogeology, I learned that E. coli bacteria gets filtered out by the ground after something like 81.6 feet or something. So in South Carolina, the state law was that a septic tank had to be 100 feet away from any kind of well or water so that, that nature would filter it out. Of course, if there's cracks in rock where it can flow faster, that wouldn't work. But the general soil in that will do that. But somebody may not be straight piping, but their septic tank may be right next to a stream, and it may have been that way historically. It's an old house, and it needs to be brought up to standards to keep from polluting the stream. But that's what straight piping is. No septic tank, nothing, just going straight in. Anything else? Okay, thank you.